Everyone, this is Vickriman, and welcome to Tyranny. We are going to be playing this game a bit on the channel. And the cool thing about this game, if you don't know already, is we are serving the Overlord Kairos because evil has won the day. And we've got the final little bit of the conquest that we're going to be doing in this game, and that's sort of the setup. And we are kind of an underling of the Overlord, which you shall see more about that very soon in the actual Let's Play. In this episode, we are going to go through character creation because this is sort of a game that I have actually, well, not sort of, I have actually finished the game. So, you know, unlike a lot of games I do on the channel, I play with everyone there, all the viewers, and kind of learn as we go. This one, I do have quite a bit of experience. So I'm going to be doing a video here today, kind of going through the detailed process of making sure that you have a character that is going to do pretty well in the game. If you're just getting started, this is sort of a kind of a generic tutorial for the different stats and all that kind of stuff and how they will affect the game, sort of coming from someone who knows kind of how things are going to go. I'm going to try not to spoil anything, but just give you some good information about how these things actually work. So obviously your appearance in the game doesn't affect anything to do with the gameplay. So you can select whichever one you want. There's 3 different body types for the the men and the women here. So we're just gonna go with kind of like the skinny tall dude. I got different skin colors here, obviously. Maybe go with something like that. So yeah, there's a ton of information here about this that actually talks about the sort of gender roles in this world, and we'll learn a lot about that in the Let's Play portion of the game as far as the lore of the world. But suffice it to say, in the region that we are going to be going into, the men are kind of associated with the sea and sailing and that kind of thing, whereas women are sort of associated with the land and they own property, which is a kind of an interesting way to rethink sort of gender norms, you know. And this whole game is, I think, a pretty interesting sort of alternative take on sort of the fantasy world. And you'll see that even more as we go, but I think one of the definitive things that is really kind of unique about this is that the world is not set in like the high medieval age sort of fantasy. That's kind of a nifty look there, but is instead, it's kind of like the cusp of the Bronze Age going into the Iron Age is the best way to describe it. It's sort of the basis. So think sort of late ancient Greece, early Roman period, for sort of the basis of what the culture is and how the weapons work and that sort of thing. So you'll see things like javelins be more prominent than in most games like this. And that kind of thing. So yeah, we've got a couple of voices. There's tattoos you can get. I've never really been a big fan of doing that. Obviously with these Obsidian games, they have the traditional portraits, which it has some appeal. I would prefer that they just kind of create a portrait based on the model you select. I don't think that's much more work programming wise, but I could be totally wrong. But I tend to prefer that just so that the portrait and the character model match. But, you know, this is sort of the tradition here. So once we do the appearance, we start selecting the background, which a lot of this, you know, you could min-max this really because these do affect your skills in the game, not the attributes, but the skills. But I really do encourage you to, when you create your character, just don't worry about this stuff. You know, think about how you want to customize them when you get to attributes and skills and that kind of thing. Oh, and I think the next one probably too. We'll see that. So we're actually going to be in this game. We're going to be creating a character who is going to be my main character in the Let's Play series. And at the conclusion, we will have a character for that series. So as far as a history, these are kind of like backgrounds. So for this character, I'm thinking that like a hunter might be the way. And each of these has actually a unique story here. And you can really kind of see that there's quite a lot of detail here. So it's really kind of neat. So we lived with wild beastmen in their migratory homes. Each long winter took a greater toll. And so the disfavored found you, take you alive, and you became a part of it, part of Kairos' army, and were delivered to the court, which we'll see in the episode that there's the disfavored and there's the Scarlet Chorus, which is the two different kinds of armies, and they're like diametric opposites as far as what they think, how they think the war should be run. And then there's the court, who has to try to figure it all out. And that's who we work for, is Tunon, the sort of judge, as it were. So now this is actually where you want to really get into the nitty-gritty of actually making the character. The background is not a huge thing. So this will actually determine your starting skills. This is the most influential stuff. Influential choices right here. So, yeah, just like most games, Sword and Shield is going to be a really great tank sort of setup. We have Javelin, as I mentioned, which, you know, is pretty neat because you can see that this has a very Roman sort of look to it, which is not, it's a bit uncommon in these sort of games. So that's kind of a cool thing. Got great sword, obviously. I'll show you the Sword and Shield there. Dual wielding, as you might expect. We've got a short bow. You can see that put us into some lighter armor. We actually have unarmored attack, which is kind of a neat idea. I really don't know how well that would work. And then as far as magic, we can go with shock, frost, vigor, and atrophy. So, as far as this character, my first playthrough, I did a mage. And if you're creating your character, you should know that every single role is going to be met by your party members in the game. Unlike Pillars of Eternity, you cannot create party members, but there is a good mix of all the different sorts of characters that you would think, sort of like the ranged DPS, melee DPS, tanks, and several characters can be spec'd in different directions. You do get a lot of customizability of them, and a lot of times they have two main options that they can go down. For example, a tank can actually become a melee DPS character, depending on which side of his talent tree you take. So, as far as creating your character, you really want to go with what works best for you. But I think I've actually thought about this quite a bit, and I think as far as the characters that you get, the main character that meshes probably the best is going to be a mage that is heavily focused on spells, and specifically damage spells, just because of the way that the game works. Having someone who's very, very good with damage spells on your party all the time is really nice. It's especially good because as far as the main character goes, as far as AI, there isn't really a great option for making the main character have sort of AI options, you know, selecting, you know, when you're controlling another character or something like that, and you don't happen to be on your main character. They don't do well with doing automatic spells, but they are very good at keeping up with basic attacks, sort of things like that. So that means that basically, since I tend to be on my main character most of the time when I'm playing these games, having them very focused on spells is a really good way to do it. So, that being said, I think that I will actually play this game just a bit differently. But like I said, I think if you're playing this and you like magic, which the spell system in this is really cool, we'll see that when we get into it. I think making a very mage damage focused main character is sort of a really great way to go. That being said, I'm also going to make this character have... I think we're going to go a bit of a hybrid build, a little bit, because of the way abilities work. We'll see that when we get into it. Because of the way abilities work, it's actually quite viable to have sort of a hybrid build with a range and melee sort of thing. So, with that in mind, I think we're actually going to pick Javelin as our main focus. So we click on that, right? And then that gives us this option. We can choose an ability that is going to be one of our starting abilities in the game. So we got Heart Shot, which is essentially a bleed attack, which is going to be quite useful. And we also have a Hobble, which is also quite nice. So these are both really good. You can't actually get them both once you start the game. But I think because we are going to do more of a hybrid build, I think bleeding is going to be more useful for Hobbled. If we were going to be fully ranged, we would definitely want Hobbled to slow the enemy down at closing the distance. But because that's not going to be our strategy, we are going to select that. And I specifically chose Javelin as the primary expertise because, and not that it really matters, because the actual skills, I believe, are the same between which one of these you pick for what. But I think Spear and Shield is a very nice combo with Javelin, right? Because they really are kind of the same sort of deal. So that, I think, is what we're going to pick. And what do we got? We got Shield Slam. We can daze the enemy. That's a solid thing. We can also do Sundered, which reduces the target's armor. And I think I'm going to take Shield Slam. And the reason for that is that you can see that it says crush damage, which is different than our main weapon here, which is obviously piercing, as Spear is obviously piercing. So is the Javelin, which honestly is not going to make a big difference because we can easily select a different weapon before long. There are 3 different types of yeah, isn't that right? 3 different types of physical damage. There's Slash, Pierce, and Crush. And different enemies have different defenses against those. So it's a really good idea to vary it. But like I said, it's not going to make a huge difference for us in the beginning. And I do like sort of the theming here, right? And by doing Spear and Shield, we do get some abilities that I kind of like to see. So we see at the end of this, it shows us what our skill bonuses are going to be. So that's quite good. So yeah, I'm picking Shield Slam so that we have an option for crush damage if we need that near the beginning. But like I said, I'm probably going to give this guy also another weapon that he can switch to, rather than 2 piercing weapons. So we'll just keep that in mind as we go into the game. But I think that'll be quite good. Yeah, we have armor customization. Obviously, I'm going to give myself a bit of a sort of the channel theme colors here. And, well, red is really the theme. I mean, white pants, kind of nice, but, you know, I think the dark pants makes a little more sense. As far as our logo, nothing here quite matches the channel. So, anything with spears, yeah, that's very thematic, right? Based on what we're going to be about. And yeah, we'll just go with white on red for that. Alrighty, so Mr. Vickriman, you're probably quite surprised that I'm not doing a mage because, you know, that's sort of the idea of the channel here. But because I have already played the entire game through the mage, I really wanted to try something a little bit different with you guys. And I think this is going to fit this character's going to fit what I want to be doing in the game's storyline as well. So, these are the attributes, and this is where the rubber hits the road. So unlike things like Dungeons and Dragons, every single point in your attributes is going to be useful in some way. For example, we see on the right, might. Might determines the physical strength of a character. Increased might leads to more powerful attacks and stronger abilities, as well as increasing the endurance defense. Even though it does say physical strength of the character, you'll see that it also includes ability strength. And we will see that essentially there are attacks, there are abilities, and there are spells. Those are sort of the 3 different types of moves that you can do, and these attributes affect them in different ways. Attack is going to be basic attacks, essentially. That's all that is. Now, that is pretty important. You want some characters in your party to be very good at that. So might is an excellent stat for that because it just increases the amount of each attack. Some characters also have a lot of abilities. Now, you don't want to make the mistake of necessarily thinking that might is going to be all that useful if you have a lot of spells. And the reason for that is wits. Wits is the attribute which describes a character's mental acuity, their ability to observe their environment and pick up on clues. Wits is used to increase spell strength as well as increase magic defense. So as you can see, this, just like might is for attack and abilities, wits is for spell strength. So my first character in this game, basically all he did was cast spells. So I wanted to max out wits as soon as possible, and that paid off extremely well. Right? That makes a lot of sense. So, with that in mind, because this guy, you know, the theming of it, he's not going to be doing a lot of spells. So, wits is probably not going to be that important. So you can decrease it to free up slots. You can go down to 8. The problem with this is that this magic defense. Magic defense allows characters to resist harmful effects from spells and attacks that deal arcane damage. Yeah, besides crush, slash, and pierce, there are also like arcane damage, fire, frost, shock. I believe corrode is a different type even. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And then there is raw damage, which raw damage is not affected by any defense at all. It just is damage, and there's really not much you can do about it. So you don't really want to worry about that. But you can see, we'll see with the rest of these stats. We see in might, we have endurance defense, and that's for attacks on the internal physical systems of the character. That's poison, disease, stuns, etc. Can also be influenced by equipped items. So some things go against endurance defense, right? And then there is deflection, which is when a character's attack, the hit result has been determined, the target's deflection percentage is checked. Deflection can reduce an attack by 1 hit result. A graze can become a miss, and a hit can become, that for every attack, they can be a miss, a graze, a hit, or a critical. So this, if you have this high enough and it hits whatever math it's doing, right? Then you can reduce it down, which is really nice. That can be quite useful. And the other defense is going to be will. Will opposes mental-based attacks, such as confusion, that sort of thing. Sort of like charms and mind control, that sort of stuff. Modified by so some things will target will, and that's going to be a lot of spells as well. You can see resolve is actually quite nice for defense because it gives you bonuses to endurance, will, and magic defense. Right? In the game, there's actually other even more sort of defense stats that you won't see here that are mostly based on your equipment, but we'll see that as we go. So, finesse is going to be sort of your physical and mental precision, increases your accuracy. One thing that you'll notice is a lot of these skills are going to be good for just about every character. Quickness, it increases, or actually decreases, actually. You see we go minus. Ability and spell cooldown, right? So that's pretty good. For, using your abilities more often and also spells more often. So, as we were talking about the mage, you want to max out wits, obviously, but then you also want to max out quickness, because that will make your spells fire off much quicker. Vitality is your basic tank sort of stat. Gives you bonus health and will defense. Pretty important for any character that's going to be a tank. And then resolve is also important for any sort of tank character. In a way, it might be more so because it increases all your defenses, right? And like I said, every point makes a difference. I think we are going to go ahead and keep wits down on this guy because even though -6 magic defense is not good, right? What we can actually do is increase resolve a bit and sort of counteract that. So resolve will be quite useful for us, even though it doesn't say that, because our character will be in melee range some of the time. It is going to be pretty important to have resolve. Obviously, might is going to be our main stat. We're gonna boost that up. Quickness, I think it's okay to leave it there. But accuracy, pretty important too, right? I think we can afford to take some off of vitality as well. Because I don't think he's going to necessarily tank, which maybe might not be the best choice with a shield character. But, yeah, whatever. I'll have some degree of ability to tank. And we can always boost vitality later at level up. But I do think resolve is a nice way to counterbalance that. Yeah, we don't have a huge amount of abilities. So I'm not convinced that this is going to be absolutely necessary for a character. We're going to be focusing on a lot of basic attacks. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good setup. Now comes to the skills, which these are sort of the things that they kind of affect everything in the game. And with combat skills, the way this works is every time you use something, basically you get experience towards leveling up one of these skills. Basically every action almost seems like. And then as you gain those skills, that's how you get levels up, is by increasing levels of the skill once you reach a certain amount of experience. So yeah, all of these have certain, you know, quite a bit of, they basically determine your effectiveness with the every weapon here on this side for the weapon skills, and support skills are actually quite a bit different. Athletics, subterfuge, and lore oftentimes are used in exploration to get certain results. They are also used in dialogue a lot of the time. Kind of all of these are might be sometimes used in dialogue, but certainly athletics, subterfuge, and lore will be. And athletics is actually used more as sort of a physical intimidation of your enemies sort of thing. Lore is going to be kind of smart sort of, you know, logical things, you know, outsmarting your enemy and that sort of. Subterfuge is like clever, sort of, you know, dirty, yeah, you know what I mean, kind of like clever, twisty. Lore is more of being a know-it-all, and subterfuge is more of being like a street smart sort of fella, if you take my meaning. And athletics is kind of like being a big brute. I think we shall. Oh, and these two are going to be your other defensive skills. So parry is going to be melee, and spells, right? Higher skill levels will reduce the damage from enemy attacks, may lead them to miss altogether. Okay. And dodge is a defense against ranged attacks. From bows, javelins, and magic spells. So essentially, melee is parry, ranged is dodge. That's pretty useful, and but I must say that these actually will go up as you fight. So it is not that important to boost it here at the beginning in character creation. What I think is more important is boosting these sort of things, subterfuge and athletics, which is what I'm going to kind of focus this character around, because these are much harder to train up. So that's sort of my philosophy here. Same with weapon skills. You're going to gain experience basically every time you use them. And this is not going to be bad. We're going to have some quite a few new options by doing it this way. That is my recommendation to you, because especially at a lower difficulty level. Perhaps if it's like the highest difficulty level, maybe you might not be able to survive the beginning of the game without doing some dodge and parry. But I think you're probably going to be okay, even at the level we are, which is the second to highest. So then you have the Conquest, which is sort of a choose your own adventure sort of thing, to start the game with the world as you sort of make it based on. So you start the game like I think it's 3 years into the conquest of the tiers, but your character has been involved from the beginning. So you choose sort of what you've been up to, and that will change how people see you, how they react to you, and sort of the state of the world at the beginning. So that's really neat. We are going to go through with that, but that is not within the purview of this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will stick around and watch the Let's Play series of Tyranny, starring this fella right here, Vickriman, the spear-throwing, spear-jabbing sort of dude. And be sure to like and subscribe if you like this video, and let me know in the comments below if anything I've said it kind of counters your experience. And we shall have that as a resource for folks watching the video. But yeah, thanks for watching, and yeah, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.